November 21st meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission. Let's see, I can't introduce our new member because he couldn't make it. So we're a little short, as you see. We had a couple last minute cancellations. But it'll all be on tape, so we'll get all the, all the good information, and people can watch it at home at their leisure, or So let's see. So I think and we can't approve the minutes because we don't have that. So I guess we're going to just jump right in and ask Porter Knight to come and speak to us. She's been working with I'm calling it the Bristol Trail Committee. Is that correct? Probably not.
It's not, but that's okay.
That's okay. Well, she's been doing a lot of work with a great committee on trails, and she's going to tell us, get us up to date on what you've been doing, and just have an open discussion.
And so by way of giving you a report or an update, what I did is I brought our party sheet from our end of year celebration. So I'm going to show you that because the party sheet actually lists all of our steps and progresses. So if I could have, I don't know, would you mind holding one end of the party sheet there? And
so it'd be good, right where you are, if you pull that up so they can get the camera.
All right, there you go. Yeah. Party sheet holders, thank you. All right, so I'll stand sort of over here. So we are the Bristol Trail Network, not the committee. And the Bristol Trail Network is a spearheaded effort coming out of the Bristol Recreation Club, which most of you probably know. The Bristol Recreation Club is a 501c3 nonprofit that's been around since 1921. So the Rec Club owns and maintains open space for recreation, all the rec fields over there, and the Bristol Trail Network is a project of the Rec Club, and we collaborate with the Conservation Commission and Bristol Corps to make this happen. So our very first meeting was in June of this year, and we had over 40 people at that meeting, which sort of blew our minds because I can't remember there being a meeting of 40 plus people when there wasn't like a problem. And that was pretty exciting. We now have about 170 people on our email list. People are just interested in participating or learning more about it or being involved in one way or the other. We've made a ton of connections with other organizations and groups in the region. The Middlebury Area Land Trust, of course, that has a trailer in Middlebury, the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, the Addison County Bike Club, and two dozen more, actually. The team that's doing outreach and education or promotion met for their first meeting in July. They wrote our mission. They actually created our name as well. So they named us the Bristol Trail Network. The idea of the network being that we didn't want to be the trail around Bristol, both because we don't want to limit ourselves to just going around Bristol, and because we didn't want to tie ourselves down. What if we don't go all the way around Bristol? So we're the Bristol Trail Network, and our mission is to create and maintain trails around the Bristol community. And there's two sort of subsets to that mission as well, because some of the themes that came out of our initial meeting had to do with how important it is to connect with the community. And so the first subset is to promote access to and appreciation for the natural, historical, and cultural resources in the vicinity, and to support the recreation and education of residents and visitors alike. And then the second subset is this idea that through trails, we want to foster human connection within the community and to tie us all more closely to the landscape and enhance Bristol's potential as an all-seasons destination for recreation. So the mission includes those pieces that are partly economic and partly about natural resources. A couple of other cool things. I won't go through all of the steps to where we got, but one of the things that happened was we were contacted by the Green Mountain Family Campground, which is the campground that used to be Elephant Mountain down on 116, and new owners this year, and they're very interested in creating some trails. Particularly, he wanted to do some mountain biking trails, and so some members of our group who have mountain biking experience went and met with him, helped him actually map several different trails, and he has subsequently cleared those and is making those available to the community at no charge. So he does have a $4 per person day use fee, so if you wanted to go picnic there and go use their swimming pool. But if you're an Addison County resident and you want to just use the trails, all you have to do is check in and you can use those trails. And they're really great mountain biking trails for beginners because it's a small loop, it's a very simple grade, but they're also good for snowshoeing, skiing, biking, walking, or running. So that's something that's available to all of us. So that was just kind of a fun thing. So the Trail Design Committee met. We did some trail work at the high school, which you might have heard about. So they had a little over a half mile of cross-country trails. Now they have almost a full mile of cross-country trails, so that's been expanded and improved. And then we did the work down at the Coffin Factory, just took a bunch of trash out of there, and we'll work again with the Conservation Commission and the Historical Society next spring when the kiosk is ready to go in. So that was fun. Another cool thing that came out of that Coffin Factory historical project is that the Hogback Mountain Brewery has dedicated their Coffin Factory Western IPA to the Coffin Trail, and so they're generously donating a portion of proceeds of that sale to the kiosk.
You're featured in their advertising on that.
Yeah, and we're featuring them because it's really good
No,
beer.
like you are, literally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on Facebook.
How about that?
Yeah.
Don't get out on the social media much, so good to know. Thanks. Anyway, they also, Kristen and I went in when they were doing the bottling, and we tied little cards on, which, no joke, are called toe tags. So we put toe tags on the beer called the Coffin Factory, and the toe tags, so anybody who buys that beer, that bottling of that beer, will learn about the Bristol Trail Network and the opportunity to participate by supporting that kiosk, so that's a cool thing. So our next steps are to look for permissions along the southern edge, so that's what I'll be working on this winter. Particularly, we want to connect the Coffin Factory site to the business park site where we'll be building a trail ultimately once some infrastructure is in, and then we'll have it all the way to the high school. So that's a really exciting section for us. We walked, you guys can put that down there. Make your arms higher. That's a really important section for us, and we walked it with staff from the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, because I felt like even though we have members on our committee who have a lot of trail building experience, it's a pretty technical section, it's very steep, and I wanted to make sure that we could do it well. And their take on it was that we could definitely build a sustainable trail there. So I'll also be writing a grant this winter to get Vermont Youth Conservation Corps in there for next summer. So that's kind of where we are and where we're headed. We do have a vision of a loop around Bristol, but we're going to be taking it section by section, and as our sort of mission suggests, trying to build community as we build trail and go from there.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it's
Amazing.
been fun. I mean, having little sound bites from people who've been doing the trail work is really great. Things like, this is way more fun than I thought. And
That was from Kristen.
yeah. It might have been, I don't know. And also, and I feel more a part of the community already. So just sort of bringing teams of people together and going out in the woods and participating in this way, it's really uplifting. So it's been very fun.
So I have a question.
Yes.
How, and you probably have already, do you have a Facebook page? Or
So-
how are you getting this message out to everyone?
So the Bristol Rec Club has a Facebook page, and of course we don't have staff, so we don't do anything real juicy with it.
Right.
We did post something about our end of the year party, and we did recently update the Bristol Rec Club webpage so that there is a tab on it for the Bristol Trail Network, and if you click on the Bristol Network Trail tab, it talks about the Trail Network effort, and then there are tabs on the side, so if you click on Coffin Factory, it'll take you to a picture of that with a little explanation of how long it is and what the terrain is and what types of activities are allowed there, like, you
Right.
you can have your dog or you can't have your dog, etc.
Do you have maps on there?
We will have maps
Okay.
on there. So actually, we've been working with a group of 7th graders. Are they 7th graders or 8th graders?
Karen Norwood?
Yeah,
Seventh.
they're 7th graders. And they're going to try to develop an interactive app specifically for the Coffin Factory site, so that you'll be able to, as you're walking through, see pictures of the historical buildings that were there previously, maybe even hear voices from guys from the Historical Society, so that's a really neat project. And if that works, then that would be a cool thing for
Right.
us to develop. But we will have maps on
Yeah, I
the
was
site.
thinking something a little more just.
Yeah, on the website, there'll be,
simple.
like,
Okay,
where
yeah.
do you park?
Right.
What are the,
Or even something that can be in the office here.
yes. So
Or
another
at the
project
kiosk.
of the Conservation Commission has been to put together better materials for the community on what are the public lands.
Okay.
And so we're collaborating on that. So right now what we have on the Bristol Trail Network is the high school and the Coffin Factory and the Green Mountain Family Campground Trails. So those 3 links are hot links that will bring you to more information.
Okay.
Then we're starting to develop those for Sycamore Park and Saunders Flats, and so we'll have all of the town properties there as well. So the Bristol Trail Network will be trails that we develop as part of this project that make up our loop and our spokes ultimately. Trails that are, or just park areas that are already land that the town has. And then others like the Watershed Center and Green Mountain Family Campground, and who knows what else we come up with. So ultimately all of those will be there, and that will be the place to go. So when people come in here or they ask the town clerk, where can I hike in Bristol? They can say, here's a website and here's information. And then we can go to paper maps from there as well.
Porter, this is great to have an update and to know about it. Have you guys talked about something that you might specifically need or seek from the Planning Commission? Or are you imagining any sort of parallels or based on
Not
where we are
necessarily
right
at
now?
this time.
Okay. But it's good to have
I'm glad
this
that
sort
the
of
plan
basis.
has the thumbs up on trails.
Right,
So that was great.
right.
I think it's great. I mean, I think it's a great project.
I do too.
And you're
Working
And I
making
brought this,
such
if
amazing
you want this, you
progress.
can have it,
Yeah.
you can each
Yeah.
take one if you care
Yeah.
to. But this is what we share with people when we go to different groups as to how you can get more information.
Okay.
I think the select board needs to hear about this as well.
I met with them last night.
Oh,
Same thing, same presentation,
Yes.
essentially? Great, good.
oh, that's good.
Did they
Okay.
have suggestions or
No,
questions?
So the
specific?
same thing, I
Yeah.
have met with them, that's the 3rd time I met with
Yeah.
them,
Oh, really? Okay.
since before we started and then the middle and moving on, so.
Good.
I think it also might be good if for town meeting, you could have actually a board.
That's a great idea.
And
I
put
would
it
take
just-
that to the Ed Promo Committee and have them put together something just as a display.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you
That
for
would
that.
be good. Well, anyone on the, do you have any questions? Any questions from the?
Other
I'm
than
sorry.
grants you were mentioning, what are your
The
sources of
grant, so
funding?
I'm specifically applying for the Vermont Forest Service Recreation Trail grant. So is it RTP, I think, Recreation Trail Park Grant. And so if we don't get that, then we'll look into other grant opportunities. But if we were to get that for the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, so the grant that we're applying for is 4 weeks of Vermont Youth Conservation Corps workers, plus an archaeological assessment, which would be required if we got that grant because there's federal money involved.
Do you have any other sources?
So we have a number of, we have like a little list of potential grant sources. We're not tapping into them yet because the first and only need for money we've identified is to have the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps come in. And if we get this grant, then that would be great. And if we don't, then we'll have, 5 months to delve into other things.
And there's been some fundraising just to get it off the ground.
Yes, so when we kicked off, one of the things that we had learned from some of the other organizations and groups that we've spoken to who have trails or maintain trails is the importance of having a fund from the very beginning. And the fund is one that initially can help us be seed money for grants that we apply to, because many grants will require a matching portion. And then ultimately it will be a maintenance fund. So while the Rec Club has almost 100 years of track record of maintaining open space for recreation, we don't want to find ourselves 25 years from now thinking, oh man, we just can't keep this trail up.
Right.
So we have started that, and actually when we at our very first meeting, we invited people to contribute. We have about $3,700 in it already just from people who have given, and we will be sending out an appeal in December as well.
Thank you.
But if you want to send money, the information's right there on the paper if anybody wants to do that now. And if you go to the website, it gives you information on how to send your check.
You're hired.
Just in case.
The It's a great project.
Yeah,
It's
it's
so
really
exciting.
You know, it is. It's been really, really positive.
You've done a great job also of sharing information. I'm on the email distribution list
Great.
and I see that and I see the posts on Front Porch Forum.
Mhm.
Just been really good,
Yeah,
really, really thorough and positive.
great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions from anybody else? No? All right.
I apologize while I roll my paper up and crinkle
Okay.
in the microphone there.
You want help?
No, you know what I'll do? I'll just drag it out and then roll it up. So I
Don't
have
rip
to
it.
Take up your meeting.
It's great.
Can't really sneak out. Here she goes. Sneak, sneak, sneak.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye, Porter. Okay, so now, I don't think, is Sasha?
Sasha could not
Is
make it
not
tonight.
here.
She had a site visit that was
Yeah.
very close to Canada, so
Oh, that's too bad. Okay, so are you David?
I ended.
David. Okay. David is going to present, continue to present, which I didn't see the first part of this presentation, but continue to present the Vermont National Resources Rivers Program and how it can benefit communities and you know, what you do and
Sure.
a lot of other things. So, go ahead.
Thanks. I might sit down for a little bit.
Sure.
Would you like lights dimmed or?
If that's that's good. All right. Well, thank you.
Just, yeah.
All right.
Not all of
Oh, wait, I need one.
You'd leave
Is there one?
One of them
Yeah.
on. So
If you could hit, I think it's the
I'm
closest
taking some notes.
to that.
Chairs over this way.
We can let that. Try this,
Yeah.
No, it's good. Come around here if you guys want to look that way.
I need to get on.
And also you want to be able
Does that
to,
kind of work?
the TV needs to be able to see him. Yeah, okay. I think that's fine, just like this.
So
Anyone can come and sit over here too.
Sean, is that fine? Thank you.
thank you for having me. As I said, my name is Dave Rosa. I work with the Agency of Natural Resources. I'm the Regional Floodplain Manager for Addison and Rutland counties. As you mentioned, my colleague Sasha had come in the springtime, talked a little bit about river corridors. I'm here to talk a lot more about them. And so we'll be talking about, and in the broader sense, flood hazard planning in Bristol. So in Vermont, when we think about flood hazard planning, we think about two ways that we see damage. So the first is inundation. So this is river waters rising up and kind of flooding our basements, flooding our first floor homes. This is kind of a lot of what you see with Florida and Texas over the summer with the hurricanes. And in Vermont, we also deal with erosion. So it's not as much the water's rising up, but it's really the lateral movement of water within the stream channel. And most of the damages that we see in Vermont are caused by fluvial erosion. So that's just a way to say erosion caused by streams. And it's really a factor of three things. The first is our geography and our climate. So we're a mountainous state, we have low valleys, and we get hurricanes, we get tropical storms, we get very intense summer thunderstorms, we also get spring runoff from the snowmelt. And so this combines to have this situation where you can get these mountainous streams kind of coming down these areas, picking up velocity, picking up power, picking up sediment, and then they kind of shoot out onto the valley and they deposit their sediment, and they also look for a way to dissipate all of that energy. We also have a historic pattern of building near streams. A lot of our initial industry was revolved around mills, so a mill sprang up, and then buildings sprang up around that mill, and so we have a lot of infrastructure that is on floodplains and very close to rivers. And finally, we have a history of stream alteration. When we built near these streams, things would get damaged. We'd go in and try to berm that stream, dredge that stream, armor the banks, and that would give us kind of an initial sense that things were safe, but in the long term, what we found is that that really exacerbates the situation. And so I'll get up and kind of just go through this map. This is kind of the situation that we have in Vermont now. The way that we identify hazards in Vermont is initially has been with the FEMA flood maps. So this red area is a FEMA special flood hazard area. It shows the 100-year floodplain. And about 20% of rivers in Vermont have mapped FEMA floodplains. It takes a lot of modeling, it takes a lot of data, and so they really focused on populated centers. Conversely, 100% of the Vermont rivers have river corridors mapped. And what happens is, if you just use the FEMA floodplain to kind of inform your decisions about hazards, it can lead to some disastrous effects. So this is Jamaica, this is the Ball Mountain Brook. You can see this is like a narrow strip of the FEMA flood hazard map. So any people that were in that flood hazard, they were signaled that they're in a hazardous area. Maybe they had to buy flood insurance. Well, what happened in Irene, you had this very large erosional effect that went far beyond the FEMA flood map. These 3 homes, they were considered high and dry. They were outside of the floodplain, and they were destroyed. Now, that's just looking at the FEMA flood map. This yellow is the Vermont River Corridor. That is a way to kind of look at the landscape and take into account the fact that we know that these rivers want to move about, they're going to meander, they're going to basically look for a stable, what we call a plan form. And stable does not mean static. These rivers will continue to move. They won't just stay in their one channel all the time. This is a graph I find enlightening. So on the x-axis you have decades, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and on the y-axis you have the number of presidential disasters that have been declared in Vermont. And these actually don't include winter storms. And you can see that we're on we have a bit of a upward slope going, that we're seeing more disasters occurring in Vermont, more damage happening, more economic damage occurring. And from 2010 to 2017, we had over 10 disasters declared. So how does Bristol regulate within the town to acknowledge these hazards that we face? Bristol now looks at the FEMA flood maps. Specifically, it's the special flood hazard areas. And as I mentioned, these are really concerned with rising waters, inundation. And the flood hazard area, the FEMA maps, it has 3 components to it. There's a floodway. This is the area more or less around the stream that's thought to convey most of the velocity, most of the power. It's the area that you really want to avoid obstructing. And then you also have a flood fringe. You might not have the amount of power and velocity coming through, but you still have the rise in water and the inundation. And then you have a zone X, which basically means outside of the 100-year floodplain. Those 3 houses that we saw, they were considered a zone X. And FEMA looks at what we call base flood elevation. So this is the elevation on the ground that you expect the 100-year flood to reach. And that's what a lot of the regulations look at. So this would be an example of a house that would maybe be in compliance by FEMA standards. Maybe this flood has reached base flood elevation. You have built your house at least to or above that base flood, so you avoid inundation, you avoid damages, you have lessened the economic impact of this flood. So Bristol itself, you allow actual new fill into your floodplains in order to elevate structures at least to the base flood elevation. So if you have a house in an area, but it's actually in a floodplain, you have some base flood elevation that's associated with that floodplain. In Bristol, you can bring in fill, build your house above it, and then when the base flood comes, you are at least at that flood. One of the problems with fill is that it displaces floodwaters. Think of getting into a bathtub. Your body mass displaces water, the water rises in the bathtub. Much of is the same effect in a floodplain. Bringing in fill, bringing in structures increases flood levels on adjacent properties. And the base flood elevation is just that. It doesn't give a complete view of all floods. It's just a statistical representation of what can be inundated with a 1% chance in any year. So if you have a house, one of them is in base flood elevation, it had to get flood insurance. You have another house that's above that base flood elevation. Well, a lot of floods will be below that base flood elevation. Some of them will be at that base flood elevation. By definition, others will be above that elevation, and other houses that were not in a floodplain, mapped floodplain, can be inundated. So this is what Bristol's FEMA maps look like. You may know that Bristol has paper maps. They're not digital as a lot of other counties in Vermont are. So these are unofficial. These are a digital representation of those maps. But you can see kind of runs along the New Haven River. There's some by the Bristol Pond. And any structures within these floodplains or this mapped flood hazard area, any new structures would have to be built to be compliant with Bristol floodplain.
David, is only Bristol on paper only, or is
No,
all
all
of
of
Addison
Addison
County? All right.
And a few like up towards the Northeast Kingdom. There's a lot of, and one of my jobs as a state floodplain manager is to keep a tab on FEMA to see when they're going to be updating these maps. Good luck.
They're busy.
Yeah.
Apparently.
No, they very much are. But again, this is nothing about inundation or erosional hazards. So actually, you can't see the text on there, but so this is a picture of Brandon. This is the July 1st flooding that occurred that wiped out Newton Road.
This past July.
That was past July. Yep. This is Rochester, Vermont, just after Hurricane Irene. This is a high and dry house that basically was a loss. This is Bristol itself in the 1998 floods. And so what River Corridors try to do is to acknowledge and to identify that rivers are going to move. So this is Lewis Creek in Starksboro, and you can see over the years the different areas that this stream has moved into. Mm-hmm. And you can think in any one point in time, maybe you wanted to build a house in that bend, and you're going to have a river on three sides of you, and it's going to be a great view. But over the long term, you have to acknowledge the fact that that stream isn't going to just stay in that one meander bend. It's going to be moving around. So that's where river corridors come in. So as a state, we've mapped river corridors for our larger rivers, and we try to take into account the space that river needs to move and to reach an equilibrium. To reach equilibrium where it's dissipating its energy and it's not degrading itself or degrading and making unstable conditions. So you can see there's oxbows within this river, and the river corridor itself is that red line going across, and the width of that is really a function of drainage area, stream width, valley slope and width, and stream sensitivity. So our stream scientists, they go out in various phases and they collect this data, and they have developed these river corridor maps.
What is stream sensitivity?
Stream sensitivity is a way to convey how much that stream has changed from what we would consider a reference stream. So if there is no sort of management or watershed changes, given the watershed area and the geological confines, what would we expect this stream to look like? And so you can say, well, this stream is very much different. It's not acting the way that typical streams of this size would act. And so that's a way that we take that into account.
Do they look at the GSA too, these rivers?
The GSA?
Yes.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah, that's very much
Important,
What
right?
is GSA?
Geomorphic assessment.
geomorphic
But that's
assessments.
very important, correct?
It's very important.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we have one here.
Excellent. That's good to hear. And so the map itself, it takes them to that red line, which we call a meander bend. or meander belt, I should say. And then it also adds 50 feet on either side of that meander belt. And this is really to acknowledge that if you expect this stream to move between these two areas, you don't necessarily want to build a house right at the edge of where you think it's going to no longer be eroding towards. So we give it a 50-foot buffer as well, and then additional development can occur outside of that buffer. So this is what it would look like overlaying both your inundation hazards, FEMA maps, with the river corridors. You can see a lot of it kind of follows the same already mapped areas, especially through the New Haven River, New Haven, and then you had a little bit more coming up. I think this is Baldwin Brook. There's a little notch that might have that hadn't had floodplain maps, but it does have river corridors mapped.
Do you have a sensitivity rating for the New Haven River?
There'd be sensitivities for different reaches of the New Haven. It wouldn't be for the entire New Haven. I can't tell you whether or not it's in this specific area. That is something that either Sasha or Shannon, another river scientist, would know if she has gone out there and done the on-the-ground sensitivity analysis for it. So besides those polygons of river corridors, we don't map them, but we say for small streams that are above half square mile, there would be a river corridor 50 feet from either side of the top of bank, basically acknowledging that these smaller streams, we're not going to go and try to map the physical corridor itself, but we would say that give that stream 50 feet on either side if it's a certain size, over half of a square mile, to not try to encroach on.
Where is that 50 feet designated from?
From the top of the bank.
The high water mark, you mean, or?
Yeah, top of the bank of the stream.
Okay, I got you.
At the time that you make the map. Because the top of the bank of the stream, as you're saying,
Right.
can change, right? So
Well,
how do you
yeah.
determine?
Well, what it comes down
Yeah.
to is if someone is looking to develop
Right.
next to a smaller stream, a river scientist would be like, this is the bank right here.
Right.
I'd suggest you don't get closer to it than
That
this.
would be like the bank full width?
Not necessarily. Well, not. I wouldn't say it could be. It could be the bank full width. It depends. Some of these streams have, as they have moved
change,
out,
yeah.
they've changed. But I don't want to say that it would always be the bank full width.
But it's sort of
Yeah.
a starting point.
Yeah, the bank full width would be an excellent starting point to say off the 50 feet. And so all of this really is trying to break a cycle that we found ourselves in. And it's a cycle in where we've encroached upon our rivers, we've gotten closer and closer to them, a flood occurs, we see damage, we see property damage, and then we go in and try to manage that river to get it back to where it was. So we dredge it, we berm it, we armor our banks. And what this has done is it's given us a sense of security, so then more development occurs along these hazardous areas. And then another flood comes, and you have to do the same cycle. And so what we see is escalating costs, we see rising risks because we have more infrastructure in these hazardous areas, and we also see ecosystem degradation because we're confining these streams, we're actively managing these streams, and increased erosion is occurring. So, to give you an example of in Bristol, I found some old aerial photography. I think this is from the early 90s. This is in the Bristol Flats area, if you're familiar with it. So this is where the New Haven River was. This is the current FEMA Special Flood Hazard Area map. And so, this is the floodway, this kind of clear line. This is where you expect the most amount of the river to be discharging its floodwaters. This is the flood fringe, this shaded area, and this is the zone X outside of the floodways or floodplains.
What would be the FEMA floodplain then?
This would be the FEMA. All of this is what we would call FEMA floodplain.
Okay.
This is a 100-year flood area. It's just that this is the area that's conveying a lot of that power but the shaded area is also being.
How often does FEMA actually work on these maps?
Yours was done in the early 80s, I think. 83.
Wow.
So, current regulations, you could build some houses. You could build the house on the right, it'd be outside of the floodplain. It wouldn't have any sort of regulations attached to it. You could also build the house on the left within the flood hazard area, as long as you brought in fill and raised it to a certain area so that it wouldn't be inundated. Well, and this is barring any sort of wetlands or other things that would be mitigating development. So after Irene, the channel completely changed. This is where the river used to be. This is where the river is now. Those homes would be, destroyed or damaged. So again, this is the flood hazard area, and this is the river corridor. The river corridor is a way to convey information that isn't shown on these floodplain maps. It's conveying the erosional hazard, and it's saying, we expect the rivers to meander throughout this corridor. And that specific spot, you may know, was later protected through an easement and the Vermont River Conservancy.
It looked like the corridor there was inside part of the floodplain.
That can happen. That can absolutely happen. It's not. You may have areas that are both within the corridor and the floodplain, and you may have any combination of the others. It's looking at different different hazards, really.
Can you point out the area that was
Right there.
that was conserved?
Oh, okay. So the area conserved is you can't really see it. I'm sorry, but there's this green polygon. That's what they call the.
Oh yeah, I see the outline.
The Saunders
River
project.
access.
So that corridor was a way to, like, after the fact, say, turns out this isn't a great place to develop. We'll conserve it for the river to meander.
And how was that decision made, and how did it come to?
Um,
I'm not familiar.
That was probably a 5 or 6 or more year-long process of discussions with landowners, and
Okay.
we brought together a public-private partnership that helped to
Your
afford.
commission.
The commission
Okay.
did help to afford purchase of those lands and then subsequent conservation of those lands.
Okay.
So, as a state, we have recommended model bylaws, and we have language associated with those bylaws. And those bylaws address both inundation hazards and additional erosion risks. So, some of the differences in the flood hazard regulations that we currently recommend are that the state looks for or recommends no net loss of flood storage volume. So this might be a little hard to see, but you can see that we have a floodplain. We have a floodplain here. We have a base flood elevation represented as that red line. And so you can say that, well, if you were going to build there and bring in fill and build something above that base flood elevation, that really is losing some of that flood storage volume. So we'd expect maybe on the other side that you would create flood storage on the other side to mitigate the fact that we've lost flood storage. Another difference would be, the lowest floors of new construction or substantially damaged structures would be at least 2 feet above base flood elevation, recognizing the fact that these are old maps, weather's changing, watersheds are changing. What may be a 100-year flood isn't exactly a 100-year flood.
So, sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions.
No, that's
So what you're saying, by bringing in fill to raise the elevation, you're essentially losing flood storage
absolutely.
area. So it's working as a dam or a diversion, even though it's not, but it's just taking away the volume.
It's taking away storage waters for the,
Right.
and it's much. If this was a bathtub, the waters would rise. It's saying
displaces.
expand. It's saying expand that bathtub so there's more water for that
Yeah.
for there to go. For river corridor standards, we recommend in village areas, don't build closer to the river and avoid new encroachments where possible. And as a town, these river corridor standards can play somewhat of a role, because looking at the disaster damage from 2003 to 2008, this you can see that the majority of the public, or of all the money that gets spent during disasters, only 5% of those are flood insurance claims from a resident or a business. 95% of those of that money is public assistance, fixing bridges, fixing roads, fixing culverts. And so through the Vermont Emergency Relief and Assistance Funds, the state incentivizes building resilience within towns. So this is a pie chart. If you're a community, which you're not, that took no action whatsoever to mitigate hazards, and a disaster hit, say it was $1 million bridge that got washed out, the federal government automatically kicks in 75% of that funding. The state kicks in 7.5% no matter what. For every town there in Vermont, the state will kick in 7.5% to get you to that bridge replaced. That leaves 17.5% as a local share. If you adopt 4 mitigation actions, you basically cut that piece of the pie, you split it with the state. Each of you picks up 12.5%. And those mitigation actions would be to adopt road standards, to be within the National Flood Insurance Program, to adopt a local hazard mitigations plan, and to have local emergency operations plan. Finally, you can actually flip the no action percentage the other way, where the state picks up 17.5% and the local share is only 7.5% by having those 4 mitigation actions and either adopting river corridors or enrolling in the community rating system through Fema. This is an enrollment that tries to reward communities for more resilient regulations, including prohibiting new structures in the special flood hazard area. That's administered by Fema. The state itself doesn't really have anything to do with that, but we do have river corridors that we promote, and so we promote both of them, but we're here to talk about the river corridor protection. And so you can see this for Bristol online. I'll give a handout that has a lot of links to them, but you can see that Bristol has adopted those 4 standards, and they're at 12.5%. The bottom one, that 5th standard, the river corridor standard, is not adopted. And so how does this look kind of regionally? There's Bristol, and you can see all the towns in that yellowish have adopted river corridors. And so Bristol would be a nice addition to that big block of yellow. So looking specifically at Bristol, these are maps. The red, again, is the Fema floodplain. The green is the river corridor. And if you see blue, that's a small stream that would have a 50-foot setback. This is kind of coming through the village. Again, you can see areas that it kind of aligns both with each other, or both flood hazards and river corridors align. You can see parts where the river corridor extends beyond the Fema flood, and vice versa. This is over by Westbrook and Little Notch, kind of following those flood hazard areas, but then the Little Notch kind of extends a little bit farther. This is largely undeveloped area. Beaver Brook and Baldwin Creek. Okay, so I'll hand out a couple things.
Can you turn the light on? Yeah, I'm not blind.
So there's a lot of information online. I will just hand out this. So really what this is good for is to give you this tinyurl.com/VT link. It's right at the top, I circled it in red. And what you can do is if you go to this link, all of these will will come up and there'll be hyperlinks that you can click on. And,
Can you wait for one more of those over there?
oh yeah, absolutely. I'll leave that right here.
Let you have it.
So yeah, so the main thing is to look at that top, if you type in, tinyurl.com/VT link, you'll get this page. Some of the things to look at, down here, you can go to that tinyurl flood ready atlas. If you click on that, you'll actually get an interactive map that you can turn on river corridors, and you can look at how it looks in your town. You could see individual structures in those towns to see how this might impact different areas. Unfortunately, you don't have digital FEMA maps. So other towns can turn on the digital FEMA maps as well. But it can be very useful. Other information on the back side, there's a lot of information, including at the bottom, bylaw update process. And there's also links to model language that you can click on and see some of the recommended language that we have. We're actually in the process of tweaking them and updating them a little bit more. They'll probably be done by the new year. We've tried to make it as efficient as possible to have these documents adopted. But they largely look, the idea behind them is largely what you can find online right now. I'll also pass out some maps. There's just a printout of the FEMA map over the river corridor map.
Thank you.
I did not print as many of these, I apologize.
You have one? I have one.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll end not talking about Bristol, but talking about Japan. So these are tablets that you can find dotting the eastern coast of Japan. And they're called Tsunami Stones. And a lot of them were put up in the 1800s after a couple of devastating tsunamis hit Japan. And the inscription kind of...
Yeah.
You get a video with that.
So the inscription basically warns of tsunami hazards, but they also say, do not build below this stone. And in 2011, when Japan had that other tsunami that disabled Fukushima, there were these stories of these towns and villages that heeded this warning, didn't build below these stones, and the waters came up too, like within 100 feet of these stones. And so the river corridors is also about like signaling to future generations that as the memory of Irene fades and the memory of the '98 floods fade, it's a way to remind future generations that these rivers are dynamic. They're going to change. Maybe it's not a great place to build a house right next to it.
I'm afraid the clickable link fails the ambience test next to that.
Fair enough. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Could you put a number on it? I mean, I don't have it from me. I know we had it before when Shasta talked about how many millions of dollars of properties in the New Haven River corridor right now. Do you have that number?
I don't know.
I know it was in the several million.
In the river corridor,
Yeah.
I can tell you that there's 68. Looking at E911
Yeah.
addresses, there's 68 properties within the river corridor.
Okay.
In what section of town?
All of the entire section. That's what I did last.
That's right. So that's anything within the blue,
Within the blue, yeah.
Parallel blue.
throughout the town.
Now that was a quick GIS. That may not be. I'm getting the sense that might be wrong, but when I did a quick computer overlay, that's as many as popped up.
And I
So,
would just add that a few of those structures appeared between the 1998 flood and 2003. And so our memories do fade, and we do continue to build within these hazardous areas.
Right, it's not just, it's about preventing future risk and building additional things that in the long run, you're gonna have to spend money to protect.
Yeah, we know about the property at the Eagle Park, that was the one that went over the Bartlett's Falls, okay? On film.
Oh, I think I might
So
have
that's
seen.
why we have the Eagle Park there now, because you can't build there.
You say it's not all bad, Peter, you get an extra part.
I'm not complaining, but
So
My-
what's the, oh, and I'd just like a real life scenario.
Sure.
Say if we had river corridors.
Yep.
What would happen to properties, existing structures existing? How does that affect landowners in that corridor?
Each
I mean, it's gonna be different, I
Each
know.
situation is unique to, there was a house that was, last couple months ago, I went to Brandon, they have river corridors. There's a house that has been in disrepair for a long time. It's in the river corridor, someone wants to knock it down and rebuild it. Rebuilding on the same footprint, like that is fine. There's also allowances for building adjacent to the structures as well. We try to avoid, if you have an existing home and you wanted to put on a garage, you would try to avoid having that garage closer to the stream than that house already is. So not pushing it back further, having it adjacent to it. And yeah,
So that's its little sort of grandfather aspect, that you can build, but it can't be any closer.
any closer and, yeah, exactly. And like within, it's open, there's some room for the town to kind of adopt as strong as they want. There is provisions if in a developed area that you have, two houses or two structures kind of within maybe 300 feet of each other, that you can build within that area, because you're basically assuming that, well, you're going to be protecting this area anyways to protect these structures. You're not opening yourself up to more risk by kind of infilling within that river corridor.
so when you build, if you're in the corridor, we'd have to build it higher than an existing building?
Not higher. It's about as how close you get to the
That's
stream.
how close to the river.
Yeah.
Then there's the issue of building, say, building on pylons or building on, and how much is that shown to be helpful?
If you pile it into bedrock, that would probably be helpful. But
It still can be undermined.
right, like another story. Brandon is now looking at a lot of buyouts along the Neshobe River, actually at Newman Road, and it's a very tough spot, erosional hazards, and there's very little FEMA guidance on mitigating your house in what they call like an alluvial fan, where you have a lot of sediment coming, a lot of the river's kind of moving around. You can't really build higher because that sediment and that power of the water's going to just wash it away.
I saw the map that showed the towns nearby that have river corridor regulation. Did it include Lincoln? It looked like it did.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
I think they have interim river corridors. I think they were early adopters of like the predecessor, which was the fluvial erosion hazard possibly, and so they have them on the interim because they were early adopters basically.
So from a property rights point of view, how does it affect the property owner if there's a corridor established? I mean, how does it affect them, and how does it affect the planning and zoning?
There is, with existing structures within the river corridors, there would be, looking to not build.
So no zoning rights sort of build upon that?
Well, I mean, there's stuff maybe for smaller structures and stuff, but we're not looking to, the regulations wouldn't look to expand infrastructure that you expect to have to protect. So there could be some implications. Again, like what I have seen in practice is that if you're looking to build the garage, you build it in the way that it's adjacent and not any closer to the stream.
So David, just another question. I'm looking at the illustration and,
Sure.
and the, the parallel lines, the parallel blue lines are what the Vermont, the river corridor,
Yep.
what your agency has determined to be the optimum,
The room that the river needs to meander through.
right, from a scientific point of view.
Yes.
I've got a question. Sure. So it's kind of a all or none thing for towns. Have there ever, that's rhetorical. So have there ever been sort of towns that have gone about it sort of in piecemeal? I mean, it's all connected.
Right.
I know, but not necessarily, certain areas that
Right.
might be considered different,
We're more at risk
as-
than others.
Right.
or as a way to move it forward, as a way to. And does that even, I mean, in a way, you're doing that already because all of Vermont is not
Right.
in this program, so.
The way that it, you have public hearings, you hear you warn the meetings and get public input. The all or nothing aspect, the towns are,
Not nothing,
But,
but all or more.
towns are open to adopt areas that they want
Right.
to protect. If you're looking for that ERAF boost, then we,
Oh, but yeah.
the state would expect adopting
Right.
For the whole town.
the small streams.
I wasn't thinking about.
But it could be a
I was
piece.
thinking about
Because
the benefit.
I mean, the money is fairly minimal.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about the overall benefit for
Yeah, I mean,
It's not
It's,
minimal.
environment.
it's 50,000 per million damage is the change that we would see. It's a 5% change. So you're talking 50,000 per million damage. The last storm, how much damage did Bristol see? Million and change?
$300,000.
$300,000 in damage?
Yeah.
So you're talking 15 grand difference. So it's not enough to make huge change. This was a continuation of a concern I had previously, is that we talk about percentages, but we should really talk true dollars when we talk about
Yeah,
this.
but that was a minor storm, 300,000. Let's not forget the 98 storm, okay? I don't even know what the number is on that, but it's in the millions.
Well, in both cases, though, much of the damage was to public infrastructure, and that's not going to move or change. River Road isn't going to move away.
aptly named.
Though we did lose approximately a dozen homes
Yeah.
in the 1998 flood that were eventual buyouts.
I hear you.
Right.
But,
Buyouts by FEMA.
Buyouts by FEMA.
Sycamore
and
Park.
by VDOT.
Yeah.
right, those were by far, Kristen, the most vulnerable,
Yes, they were.
and we're gone. And
Most
so-
vulnerable, you said?
Yeah.
Most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And if we look at the example you gave of the schematic
Mhm.
with a change in the swing or meander, I guess you call it.
Yeah.
Am I getting my terminology?
Absolutely.
Okay. The meander of the river. Those didn't have homes and they weren't likely to, and now with the easement on the southernmost, it's even less likely.
Yeah, that's true. But
I'm just
I
giving you something to
yeah,
think
I agree
about.
with you. But I guess as I ended on is that idea of alerting for future growth to approach future growth. I mean, I don't know if Bristol will always look exactly like it does right now, but
Probably not.
it would be, there's an opportunity to say, we know what, we've seen the damage that these rivers have done in the past.
So to look to the future, though, we know, I mean, stream sensitivity, we all know that New Haven River is in a state of flux. It's a flashy river. It's far from stable. It's probably going to get worse before it gets stable, in my opinion. So I'm looking towards the future. Just because we've had these major floods and we've taken a few things out, that doesn't say that we can't have another major flood and we may say, ha, and we just took another thing out. I'm just saying that this New Haven River, I've been I'm more intimate with this river than my two exes, and this river is in really a state of flux. It is
I'll
a
have to
very
think about
dangerous
that
river.
one, Peter. I don't know if your two exes are in a state of flux either.
I was just trying to make a point.
One of the maps you showed earlier on was the Lewis Creek meandering. And as you look at that, the meandering occurred up until it looks like about the 80s, and then it looks like it stabilized the meandering per your map. And if I remember right, during that time frame is when a whole pile of work was done on Lewis Creek to shore up the bank line. And is that a direct result of actual man's work up there? Or have we not seen a major water incident or flood, if you would, since the 80s in that area?
There was a 2006
Yeah, I thought there were.
I know that
in that map of the Lewis Creek. I think there was another one later.
Right.
Yeah,
That
I
was
can-
very different.
I can't speak to the specific management that occurred. I do know that recently they've had to armor some of that bank because it's starting to erode into their fields,
Yeah.
into their baseball fields. I don't even know where it
Oh,
is.
I know what you mean.
Can we keep asking questions?
You can.
No, that's great.
Can I keep
I have a
going?
question.
No,
Oh,
please,
sorry,
I want to
can ask-
ask all questions.
I
That's
want
why
to know
we're
about.
here.
I want to know about the digital mapping, and I don't want to put the us or the regional planning commission. I know you're not here to represent them necessarily, but
Yeah, sure.
all right.
He's knowledgeable. Good guy.
In terms of the updates to the FEMA maps,
Yeah,
I've
or
been,
any other.
I've been told candidly that Addison County maps will be updated sometime after I'm dead.
Oh, and why is that?
Make sure you
That
don't
can
want
happen.
We don't want you expiring.
Why is that a factor of Addison County as opposed to other counties?
FEMA concentrates its limited funding, which has been in the
Yeah.
100 million or whatever a year, on areas which are most at risk. Areas that are most at risk are not places where the flooding is happening the most, but where the development is happening the most. So if you get
That's-
places
So
that
elsewhere in
Interesting point
Vermont,
right there.
meaning,
There
if they were, so
there are
that,
other areas in Vermont that have been updated
yeah,
within the
Like
last
around
15
Burlington?
years.
Along the Route 100.
because they didn't have any, yeah,
Yeah, parts of Chittenden County,
Right.
Wyndham County, Windsor County, I think.
okay.
Rutland was redone in like 2008. I
Yeah,
think.
Rutland may have been the most recent.
I see.
But they certainly, or they
I'm
recently
just
have.
remembering, did
defunded
everyone
that.
sign in? We didn't have a sign-in sheet.
I've got
Oh, you did? Okay.
Okay, so short of a FEMA map, you guys are operating with that and
And
any current, what?
Well, there is a FEMA map, it's just paper.
paper.
All right, paper, okay.
Yeah.
So what do? Do you scan the paper map and then you use it in a digital way to sort of illustrate this? I guess just from a,
So we have, I showed you, that red that you see is I believe one of the regional planning commissions did the digitization.
Yes, we did.
Yep, yes. We look at that as like,
Okay.
if a town asks me if something's in the flood hazard area, I'll initially look at that. Rough
so it
layer.
helped to like for us, right, to get a good sense of what's in that corridor. Any single person in town should be able to ask, am I in that corridor? Is my business, is my home in there? Proposed area, and could we tell them, I guess?
No.
would
The
be
river
the question.
corridors. Or are we talking the river corridors or the?
Within the river corridors, the proposed, like what you are illustrating here,
Yeah,
could
you can
I
go
tell
on-
someone?
You can go onto Flood Ready Atlas and turn on the
Okay.
river corridor layer.
Okay,
Yeah,
It'd be-
that is doable. It's the FEMA stuff that is much
That's
more
a little
awkward.
Okay, okay.
When they scan and then try to turn it into a digital format, they have to stretch it,
Yeah, that's what I did right here
Okay.
actually.
squeeze it.
and so, just so I understand the components here, that's a really helpful thing to be able to do, because I think people would want to know that, right?
Sure.
And so how does the FEMA unofficial SFHA relate to the corridor? What would trump, I mean, would a river corridor trump the FEMA
Can I help reframe your question?
Yes, please. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I do.
And he's gonna ask it.
That's okay. Okay, good.
Yes, it was on my list.
Good, okay.
How about explaining and describing the difference between flood hazard and river corridor regulation?
Sure. If your house was only in the flood hazard area, or you wanted to build a house in the flood hazard area, you would primarily only be concerned with elevating the house to some base flood elevation. Currently in Bristol, you'd have to build it to the 100-year base flood elevation. If you wanted to build a house in a river corridor, if there was nothing in there, if there's no structures, the regulations typically would say, we're not looking to build within this open area of the river corridor. If there was other structures in the area, then there is ways that you can build with, kind of building in areas that are already going to be protected or are assumed you're going to be managing the river in this area.
So how define that more carefully? If you have some development,
So again, you could there's the specific language is on those on that.
one of these lengths,
Yeah, on the back side you can click on language, the hazard language, or model bylaw language, and it would have an example that we give is if there's like two houses within 300 feet of each other, you can build within that area between the house. You can also build structures that are within the river corridor, but not any closer to the stream than the house that already exists.
So it does allow for some buildings
Yes.
still.
It
within
does.
the river corridor.
No build
It's
zone.
just, it's about avoiding new infrastructure that you're gonna now have to protect.
Yeah.
As opposed, so if the town had never had to put riprap in that area, because there had never been a house in that area, and it's in the river corridor, you're gonna not wanna build in that area, because it's a new thing that you have to protect.
So if you had 3 adjacent lots, all along the river, and you had houses on either side, and a lot in the middle with no construction on it, you're saying it would be acceptable to build a house on a separate lot, but not any closer, because it's in
It's in an area that you're expecting to
that you see
already
development, so it's matching that.
That part of the
You're
stream is
increasing.
lost to us, that part of the
So
stream.
you see that as, okay.
We're gonna be protecting that area, we're gonna be riprapping, the town will be riprapping that area
Okay.
to protect those.
So you see that is not really making a huge increase in
No,
risk.
it doesn't affect the.
I mean, the landowner, but.
So once
But
one
not-
thing is there, or once two things are there, or is it by
Not
size?
necessarily,
I think-
well,
well, I
that's,
just wanted
it's not
to see-
necessarily,
I know
Yeah.
it's not exactly like that,
Yeah.
but,
but there is,
but you could
I
get
think
to.
it's more got to do with the current density of development.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that fits into my concerns, because I worry about the long term, sort of after I'm dead, et cetera. We operate a business that's entirely in the red flood zone. And I think we've had 2 feet of water running through the mill 3 times that I can remember.
really,
And yet, right now, we're expanding the mill a little bit to become more efficient and survive. And I worry about 20 years from now, when it's necessary to build on again in order to compete in the world marketplace. And here we are, there's another board that doesn't know any of us from Adam, and the rules have changed again, and all of a sudden, no, you can't, no, you're in a flood zone, you can't do anything, to heck with it. And then, when 10 years later, we may be gone. And I worry about the flexibility to continue to grow some in our spot. And we're in a flood zone. My grandfather picked a crappy spot. I mean, just how it is. The motors are up in the air, it doesn't really bother us, but we're in a flood zone. What happens in 20 years?
if, typically, if it's only in a flood zone, non-residential structures have a little bit more lenient, regulations attached to
Yeah, I was
them.
gonna ask.
It's not about elevating, it's about, at least flood proofing up to a level. So that would be one thing that.
Which you probably think about anyways, right? Because you're gonna make an
The rules
investment.
tend to get more specific and more restraining as time goes by. And is that necessarily true in 20 years?
Is what true in 20 years?
Hmm?
Is what true in 20
That there
years?
will still be enough flexibility for the business that has been sold to somebody else, presumably to expand and grow and keep the jobs there? Or is it, hey, sorry, you're in a flood zone, too bad, you should have built 20 years ago?
That the inexorable march towards more burdensome regulation will always continue. And that
And
explains
will
why.
somebody exist who's understanding of, well, okay, you're there, you've got 18 buildings, maybe one more isn't such a big deal, and we can figure something else. It was flexible.
Well, that's essentially what you're saying, isn't it?
It always
Within
sounds that way.
reason, within, I mean, it's the patterns and how it's done.
I guess well, if it's only the flood hazard area, if it's there's also
Well,
that
we're
info.
partly in between the blue lines there. It's kind of hard to tell exactly.
That's why I was wondering about, being able to look more specifically.
Yeah, so you
And
absolutely.
see the blue line and see structures.
So on
You
that
can zoom in.
webpage, you can zoom in and see exactly where you are.
But
That may or
David,
may not be reassuring.
So
David,
go
I'd
back
just
to
like-
Sue's question and Ken's question. If you're in the blue line and the red area both, which one governs and which one is more strict?
Yeah, it depends on what you're doing, really.
For if you're a business trying to survive.
Again, it'd be specific to what you're trying to do, I guess.
Mhm.
I can't say
A new structure.
a new structure. So a business could build a new structure, as they are now, could build a new structure in the flood hazard area, and probably flood-proof up to the base flood elevation.
But if it's in the blue line,
Well, if it was adopted, if
River corridor.
river corridors were adopted,
yes,
and if you're expanding that business,
yes.
it would be to not get any closer to that stream.
As long as.
As where it exists at the time that you're
Yeah.
initiating building. That's the whole point of this meander conversation, which is,
Right.
not, like having gone and studied the exact location of the water as it is near your
Now,
buildings
right.
at this moment,
Right. 'Cause we've
if
got
it
300
truly
feet of-
meanders, it truly meanders, so that
That's
means.
why we have time machines, so.
Okay, we need to go future, back to the future.
That's right.
We're not trying to put you
So
on the
you're-
spot
No, no, that's-
specifically because you can't really answer because you don't,
Yeah.
necessarily know. You haven't marched around down there. And
It's a lot of why I and like the scientists go out a lot. That's why Sasha went to almost Canada today.
Yeah.
To kind of
look,
yeah.
to actually
Take the
look.
tires and see
Yeah.
what was happening.
Yeah.
Turned out they weren't in the flood zone.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty important to identify that the river corridor, the blue lines that are on the map are ones that A&R has essentially said, this is probably about where it is.
Yes.
When it comes to actually adopting within a town, they will come out and really look at your river and determine where the corridor should be, because
Based on
The-
soils and geography.
the state says that state highways stop a river corridor. Whether the river corridor normally would have gone through there, the state is willing to protect it. I don't know how you handle places like the mill, which are already probably pretty heavily armored. Does that also stop the edge of the river corridor like a highway does?
Well, so I'll push back a little bit on.
The river bank,
On-
you mean, not a river corridor, because we have to be
Okay.
careful what we're calling a river
The
corridor.
river corridor changes depending on what infrastructure is in place.
So there's two questions there. The first is, it's always a question about the maps. Those are the maps that would be adopted. If there was question, well, someone thinks that, okay, I don't really think the river corridor expands where this map says it expands. That is when, if there's a specific building that wanted to be built and said, this is ledge that we're on, this river's never going to be meandering up to here. That would be a time when a river scientist would come out and say, like, okay, well, yeah, you're right, this is a bedrock outcrop.
Oh, I see.
The river corridor actually comes this way because we don't expect the river to be eroding through that bedrock.
So there are natural features that would influence that,
Um,
once you get down to it.
For specific development, that would
Yes.
be when, if someone wanted to build in the corridor and thought that it should be different, we could do that while we take a look at it. Oh, the other question. I forgot what the other thing was.
Roads and.
Oh, roads. Yeah, there are situations where we expect that the state highway isn't going to be, that's going to be there for now, and it's going to be maintained. And then in areas like that, we have tried to clip it to that state highway, and in some cases give the river additional room on the other side, acknowledging the fact that it's going to be bumping up against that river and diverting its energy, or bumping up against the road and diverting its energy back out.
Do we have a spot where that's the case? When you say state highway, you specifically mean state highway?
The best example I can give in Addison County is Ripton,
Right,
through the village.
right.
The corridor has been clipped at Route 125, even though it routinely floods
The river meander.
into the
Yes,
village.
right.
Sure.
I'm making a distinction
and
between
that's a-
your use of corridor and his use of corridor, which is two different things. His use of corridor is a technical term now. What he's suggesting is an area, and you're saying corridor, you mean meander, the river meander.
The space that the river needs to
Yeah,
meander.
I know what you mean. Yes, I'm just making that.
And whether we
I'm
allow
just
that
making
space
clear.
or don't allow that space is sort of the question.
Right.
So I
In some
have,
cases, we allow it.
I got it.
can I, anyone else?
You can slip in there.
I can slip in. Okay, a process question, hypothetical, say, Bristol, we want to look into this.
Yep.
We want to look at certain properties. Let's just say, we want to look at the mill and how that would work. Is it possible then how do you go about doing this? You go out, you do the field work, you see, this would be, these
An
would be the
exploration, how do you,
implications, just as an exploration. I mean, there's no commitment. We have to eventually adopt it or not adopt it. But there's a process before that of mapping where you really get on the ground. Is that correct? It's not just, and
What, as the state?
not you, but, yeah.
I mean, those are the maps.
Right,
Um,
right.
I guess, as a town, it would, I very much
We could
recommend
have additional.
going out and looking at areas and
Yeah.
seeing
Technical
how this is
support,
impacted.
technical support to
Yeah,
say,
that's what we're here
in
for.
this area,
You can certainly ask.
these would be the implications. This is,
Sure.
and then if you wanted to do development, if you wanted development, and then future development could happen here, and that's something that you could project and figure out.
If you wanted, like me and Shannon, I think would be the river scientist, we'd be glad to come and maybe like walk,
Right, I'm just
do a
saying
town visit and
hypothetical,
look at
that's
areas.
hypothetical.
So far as tech support,
Behave yourself.
does the state offer support to actually have work with the planner board to document the corridor plan within, or do you just offer technical support?
To document the.
Well, I mean,
They
say if
offer
the town of
model
Bristol wanted to
language.
get started to do a corridor plan, would they have to do it on their own, or would the state offer their?
Well, the plan, I guess the corridor plan would be the bylaw language,
Ah.
which we,
model language.
Okay.
that
You
which we
have.
provide. And happy to, with the,
With tech support.
with the planning commissions are happy to work with the towns in kind of getting the nitty gritty of
Have
the,
you worked with towns before on corridor plans?
Corridor plans or corridor bylaws? There is a difference.
Bylaws. I
Okay,
think
bylaws.
Peter's meaning bylaws.
Yes.
Bylaws, yeah.
Corridor bylaws, yes, we worked with Lincoln and Ripton.
What about Middlebury? Middlebury have any?
Middlebury does, they initially only adopted for the Middlebury River in East Middlebury.
okay,
Oh, so
that's,
they just did it one river.
Yeah.
Initially, and so I'm not even sure they're grandfathered in because they didn't adopt across the whole town.
they're not, I think they're 12 and a half for their ERAF, so I don't think they've gone through the
Full.
I don't remember them being yellow.
yeah.
But David, I also think I hear you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this town could look on a reach-by-reach basis. And if there were already developed areas, say the village of Bristol or the mill area, where we as a community knew that we would continue to protect those properties, those could have somewhat softer language in the zoning versus other areas that we would say we would perhaps want to protect more stringently and say there should be no new development in these reaches?
I guess that's, calling out individual parts of town would be new to me. I guess my initial reaction would be to try to make it as simple as possible to kind of look at the areas that you're interested in and to see if the bylaw language meets what you're thinking of before getting too complicated with
Here, but not
carving out individual areas.
Right, it's more use, and it's more use, or, no, go ahead.
Yeah, and but yeah, like, part of our jobs is to kind of work with you as this language develops, and we have some minimum standards that for the ERAF rate is what we'd look to meet, but we're open for the town to we want the town to make this their own, to feel like it's theirs, so that it continues to, they're the ones that are looking to protect this area.
It's not for private money, the ERAF money, huh? Just for...
No, it's only for the public infrastructure.
Because I think we have, as a town, invested in conserving and protecting those areas that are presently not developed and can offer flood resiliency and attenuation of storm flows, like the Saunders River access, like the whole gateway to Bristol on the northern end of the village along Baldwin Creek. So we've made a concerted effort to set aside and protect some of those areas as a swap, if you will, for those more developed areas like the mill or the village. That, at least that's been our logic up until now.
Does that still make sense in terms of river science and?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that makes perfect sense. And like, this can be a continuing discussion where you see an area that maybe is a concern, and I'll forward it to the river scientist, and we could be like, well, yeah, kind of look at what the implications are for individual areas.
I've got a few more.
You do? We'll let you go.
Okay, thank you. It seems to me, David, that where I've seen the greatest damage is when you get a lot of stormwater developing in the mountains in a very short period of time. And the stream or river just can't handle it. And so when it starts to get down to the bottom, it explodes. And if there's a village there, like down in Windham County, it virtually destroys the village, and then to a lesser extent in other examples like East Middlebury and some others, even a couple of places here in Bristol. But in our case, when the river makes the bend around the Lathrop property, it spreads out very quickly into a very wide plain. It seems to me that dissipates the energy very rapidly as it does so. And so while we do tend to see some pretty good flow in the worst part of the storm, or maybe a few hours after the worst part of the storm, it very, very quickly just becomes inundation as opposed to damaging erosion. What are your thoughts?
Are you familiar with that spot?
Not that specific spot, but I understand.
Right there, the big bend, right? Bill, is that what you're talking about?
Oh,
It comes down and it bends hard.
This is
sure.
But it's deep there, Bill, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 160 feet up to the top
Yeah.
of the ridge there. That's post-glacial deposit.
Right, so it pushes.
Yeah, there's a big drop down.
You know better than we
You're
do.
talking that when you get down on the flats,
Yeah.
you
Down around
see inundation.
Saunders.
Around Saunders, you see more
Oh,
inundation than erosion.
Yeah. You're talking about that good gravel. I'm just pulling your leg like Peter. Don't get so cross with me, Peter. I'm just kidding you.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be.
It's all right.
So I guess I'd love to see that area because it sounds pretty pretty interesting.
Protected.
I would just say that, you know, erosive forces happen at different time scales. So sometimes you have these very violent, very sudden, drastic changes in the river. Like we saw, it's not up there, like we saw in the Bristol Flats after Irene. That took one storm and the river completely adjusted. There's also kind of long-term, slow erosion, degradation processes that occur that also affect the geometry of a stream, not necessarily in one instance, but over time. You know, the river is maybe stable, but it's not static, so it moves around. If you look, there's some great maps of the Mississippi River and all of the areas that it used to be in, and like that's one of the biggest rivers we have, but in the long term, that thing adjusts back and forth. The other, what I would just mention is I didn't really talk about stream dynamics that much, but a lot of our streams in Vermont are in a state of adjustment. They're kind of coming out of this phase where we were trying constantly to dredge them and berm them, and what we were causing head cuts to travel up into the streams, and we were causing areas where maybe it was wider than it should have been, and so sometimes if it's too wide, the water will dissipate and slow down, but then you start to get a buildup of sediment because the velocities are slower, so you can't push as much sediment through, and so a lot of our streams are in a state of adjustment. And one of the broader ideas about river corridors is that we're not looking to actively manage these streams anymore. The stream will take care of itself if you kind of step back and let it find its path where it's trying to dissipate its energy in an equilibrium fashion, and that usually means meandering through, but not always keeping the same meander. So,
Well, let me build on the hypothetical a little bit.
sure.
As you come down into this point, and you'll see it if you're going to help us,
Definitely driven past.
help us figure it out. The first phase is where we have this traditional industrial development going back to 1938. And that is armored, largely. But once you get beyond that, where there's the turn in the river, then everything opens up. That's where you have the conserved land.
Okay.
There's no proposed building of houses, and certainly I would submit that at that point, you're dissipating huge amounts of energy. You will, in a very bad flood, get some overtopping of the armor, but because the mill's been through many floods, it's been built in a way so that it can weather that, even a fairly harsh flood, and repair itself afterward. So I'd encourage you to think about that.
Sure.
I want to ask you a couple more thought experiment questions. I heard you mention that one of the principles in the flood hazard zone, I think it was, but whatever you add, ideally you will subtract. Was that flood hazard or river corridor?
That would be recommended model language for the special flood hazard area, so the FEMA flood zone.
FEMA. Oh, I want to ask you about that too. But first, this question. So does that mean conceptually, theoretically, that if you dug a hole elsewhere, you would be adding to the reservoir capacity?
Theoretically, it's not.
Is that what dredging is?
Dredging is within the stream. What if you're in the construction industry? It's usually like a cut and fill.
It's crazy.
And so,
I know. And
the guidance would be that it couldn't just be a ditch somewhere 300 feet over that way. It would have to have some connectivity to the existing floodplain.
So that it would take in the flood.
It's not the ideal. The ideal situation would be to not fill in, but that's a way to kind of allow for development, but try to maintain some flood storage.
I hear you. I'm just testing the idea.
Yep.
Now the the next what thought experiment is recognizing is, I think a careful look will show most of the damage we've had has been to roads and bridges. For example, the road going to Lincoln,
Yeah.
the state road coming along the New Haven, were enormously expensive to repair, and they get damaged in many of our most serious floods. But neither one of those roads is likely to be closed. For the private damage, private property damage, structures, if the owner is not asking for subsidies or supports from the state or federal governments, isn't that different than if they are?
You're talking about kind of if they're looking to take on the risk of building in the taking on that, individuals can take on risks if they choose to, but one of the ideas behind river corridors is that impacting a stream at one part of it has repercussions both upstream and downstream. If you berm or if you armor, you're diverting energy away, and you're constricting the river at times. And so there's larger implications than just this single property, and it's kind of taking a larger look at the landscape in total and how. And that's really a lot of where some of our problems have occurred, is kind of this piecemeal management of streams everywhere, and in the larger landscape that has really caused some problems for us.
And I think also there's the issue of when that private structure gets washed out and downstream, then it's debris and it's hazard and it's potentially blocking the next downstream crossing structure, culvert or bridge. So it's a loss to that person, but it's also perhaps a risk or a threat to other people's property.
That's a fair point,
And
Kristen.
you have to remember the life safety issue as well. Someone's living in these houses. That's one of the reasons why the FEMA floodplain is more restrictive on a residence than it is on a business. And the same thing would be true with a house that sits on top of the edge of the bank. It's nighttime, had a heavy rain, and the river decides it's going to erode through. That house is going into the river, and those people, if it doesn't go in the river, those people are at risk. If it does go in the river, maybe they're dead. And in either case, the local first response agencies are going to respond at their life risk, even though you've identified that you're willing to take the risk to your property. You don't get to say you're willing to take the risk to yourself.
I understand, that's another fair point. I'm talking about property damage in my case. In the case I'm constructing, and it seems to me that when that is the principal risk, that some consideration should be given to the person who's willing to self-insure.
That is a misconception often. There's no insurance tied to river corridors at all.
There is the flood hazard.
If you're in a flood hazard area and you want a mortgage, you need to get, if you're getting a federally backed mortgage, you need to get flood insurance. Because that's administered at the federal level. There's no sort of insurance regulation associated with the corridors.
Can you explain the difference between the FEMA regulation and the river corridor regulation? You said there was a provision that gave you the 7.5% with a FEMA rule or a FEMA program. To get to that 12.5% state share, there were 4 things to do. One of them was to be enrolled in the National Flood Insurance Program, which Bristol is. And that is about regulating
the height of structures for the most part, and sometimes avoiding them. And then through the state funding, if you adopt river corridors and you take on this, these regulations that say, we acknowledge that you can raise your structures in flood hazard areas, but you should really avoid getting too close to the river in river corridors, then the state kicks in an extra 5%.
I thought you said there was another program that you didn't have.
Oh, the community rating system
Yeah.
that is administered by Fema, and it rewards. The community rating system is really designed for communities that are looking to lower the rates that individual insurers are paying on their flood insurance. So if you're a community that has a lot of people in floodplains and they're all paying very high insurance premiums, you can enroll in the community rating system. You can show them that you're adopting different measures to become more flood resilient, and the federal flood insurance rates can be lowered for your community.
Okay. And there's another question that I can't think of right now, so you can go again, Katie.
No, I'm done. We might, oh, you have a question?
Just actually, from a zoning standpoint, I'm looking through your tech. For it to be a river corridor program, the actual bylaw verbiage, in order to qualify to be part of that program, is that a preset, or is there a preset of standards? I mean, as I'm looking through the verbiage, there's uses that are allowed, there's exemptions, there's conditional, and there's some variance opportunities in here. Is this sort of stock language that would be required by the state to be enrolled in a corridor program? Or do you just have to say you have a corridor program and you write your own rules? I mean,
You guys have the model language, right? Is the model language required? I guess that's your question.
yeah.
The model language is
A
not.
starting point?
It's a starting point. There's specific things. You can have it stronger than the model language. Say no structures at all in the river corridor. Like one of the specifics that we would look for to give ERAF money, say, would be that you adopted the 50-foot buffer on the small streams. But that, and adopt the maps that A&R produces, as opposed to say, just 100 feet off of every stream is going to be our river corridor. Like that kind of stuff is what we would look for if you were interested in qualifying for.
So it can kind of be tailor-made to, this is kind of what I was getting at before. It can be, you start with that model language, and then you can maybe look at specific areas and finesse it and sort of, with the approval, with working with A&R.
Absolutely.
And so that it still meets certain requirements, or maybe, we tweak it here and there, and so the balance basically comes out. And so it's sort of tailor-made for our rivers and our community and our development.
I would encourage you to look at how this impacts your specific areas, and and it wouldn't, it could be sent to me, it could be sent to the planning commissions, and even myself, I would, converse with other river scientists and be like, how is this meeting our standards?
And all that would happen before we adopted it.
Yeah, we'd want to get this, we'd want to, and
Does VNR have to sign off on it ultimately?
I would send a memo to emergency management saying you've adopted river corridors to our standards and that you're eligible for 17.5% ERAF. I just did that for Danby.
In the cases where you have just a blue line on the map and not a single line, not a double,
Yep.
does that mean there is no corridor there?
The single line are the small streams that have watersheds at least half a mile big, but they are not big enough to have a polygon mapped. And so those small streams are those streams that we would say, the corridor isn't, you can't see it on the map, but it is a 50-foot buffer off of the top of the bank.
Okay, so where you have a double line, it's more than
50.
50.
Yeah, typically.
So just reading, so top of bank was one that we discussed earlier, and again, I'm having to administer this. As I was reading the tentative description or the verbiage, it's about as nebulous as it comes. That's not great for trying to administer. If it's a 50-foot buffer from the top of bank and I say it's here, but they say it's there, I mean, have other towns come up with or is there it's gray areas like that make administering it hard, if not impossible.
Oftentimes, it's pretty clear what the top of the bank is. It's at the high water mark where the land starts to flatten out. There are some strange streams in Vermont that, especially coming down from the mountains, and they've kind of been eroding through that. The top of the bank gets a little harder to establish. In that cases, the zoning administrator contacts me sometimes, or contacts the river scientist directly and says, hey, they want to build something over here. I'm not exactly sure where the top of the bank is. Do you mind coming out? And we come out and see where it is. I think Green Mountain Power was putting some poles up through Bristol, and I went out with because that, like, some things that aren't that are exempt from municipal jurisdiction, the state enforces these sorts of river corridor restrictions. So, we were walking around Bristol with Green Mountain Power and a couple places like, okay, that's the top of the bank at this, and so put the pole beyond there.
Where are you based, David?
I am.
Your office, I guess.
I'll be permanently based in Rutland. For the first 6 months of my employment, I've been mostly out of Montpelier.
Okay. But Addison County is your...
Addison and Rutland County are my jurisdiction,
Yeah,
my district. And
Yeah.
I'll be working permanently out of the Rutland office.
Okay.
You referred to floodproofing of buildings, and David, and if we had a corridor plan adopted, is that something that's mandated in order to have an adoption
So
of the
the-
plan?
The floodproofing comes into play only for the FEMA maps, where you're concerned about inundation. There's no sort of structural guidance for river corridors other than don't get too
Don't do
close
it.
to the stream.
Listen,
There's where floodproofing and elevation comes into play is that really affects how much the bank is going to, or how much your insurance premiums are. If you build a basement in a flood zone, you're probably going to have very high insurance rates because you have a lowest floor that's even below the baseline elevation. And so the real structural questions about how high do I need to build, or what are the proper materials to build, those typically only come into play when you're talking about special flood hazard areas and FEMA insurance rates.
Anyway, I have one more. So 50-foot buffer on the brooks.
Yep.
This is the other one that we have in town had an issue. We have currently on the zoning, there's a 50-foot setback from rivers. We had a homeowner who is on a brook that is basically bedrock. We denied his permit, went to the environmental court process. The courts actually ruled in his favor that he was able to encroach upon that 50 foot because of its bedrock and because of the situation and blah, blah. He won.
So the natural geomorphic nature of it meant that it was probably okay.
So where I'm going though is,
It's
it's a small brook that's not on here, that's in bedrock. If we put a 50-foot buffer on it, now from an administration standpoint, are we going to court again with other homeowners in
I
the
think
city?
that's where you need to look at the language. It's a-
And there's language where, like, if there's a question, A&R can determine it. And in the case where bedrock confined streams are, typically, this has been a question that has come up. It would be a question for the river scientists about whether or not the 50-foot buffer off of a bedrock is. I guess it depends on where that top of the bank of the bedrock,
Right.
where you think that channel is. But that's interesting. I haven't. When was that case?
It was a while back.
8 years ago or so.
Might be worth looking at what the justification for the 50-foot was originally too. If it said in order to protect houses who may be damaged by the river, we say that you're gonna have a 50-foot setback, then if I was the court, I would say, yeah, this is not at risk. On the other hand, if the town zoning regulations said, we believe it's best to have a 50-foot setback and therefore require it from all streams, that's a different thing. Because you're not saying it's because the house is at risk or anything of the sort. You're just saying, no, this is what we're doing.
I'd have to look at further, but that was just one of those where I was like, 50 foot just bit us. I remember this, still dealing with it.
But setting aside the case where it's on bedrock, if you had a 50-foot setback, what would be the difference between that and the river protection corridor?
Same thing. It's just the 50-foot. We didn't map the small streams. Everything applies. And it's just, these smaller streams are still dynamic, but they're hard. It would be a large feat to try to
Corridor those
map
too.
those, yeah.
At Regional Planning Commission, we have been adding 50 foot to either side of your line dot configuration so that towns can have an understanding of how much of the land is being affected.
So he's on the atlas. When you go onto the atlas, you just see this line for the small streams, and you're saying that you actually buffer that 50 foot so that when you look at the maps, you can see what it is. And oftentimes, as like you saw on those maps, a lot of those streams are just kind of in the woods or I don't know.
And in some cases, they look like they're feeders. Would you call that a feeder?
Tributary.
Yeah,
Feeder.
tributary.
Sure.
Not that there's anything wrong with woods.
Woods? No woods.
We like the woods.
Just woods.
Okay. Should we wrap it up?
Yep.
We're gonna wrap it up. That was great.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. We got a lot of good information for our thinking experiments.
Yeah, not a clear.
And
Thought experiments.
Thinking.
Homeowner loss on
But,
setbacks.
okay, we really
Thanks for
appreciate
having me.
it. Yeah.
The state we lost.
Thanks for coming
No
down.
problem.
That was my
Can we get back to Montpelier tonight?
No, I live in Virginia, so.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good.
That's good.
We definitely lost the case
Coming back. He lives in New Haven.
That's what we want.
Tell us, introduce this meeting.
Yeah, I was plugged into it, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Another thing that's in your
David, nice shot.
mitigation plan
My
is
name's PC11212017.
looking at closing the Lincoln Road,
Yeah, nice shot.
We'll talk about that later.
because that's repeated damage.
What?
Thanks, Tim.
You bet.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kristen.
Kristen.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna move along here. And, okay, the next item.
Can I just ask a quick question, Katie?
You may.
Would you want to, just having had this
Okay.
presentation now, I think it would be important to share the information, not just in the form of our minutes, but to share it with the rest of the members in our next meeting, or what would be your recommendation for considering the topic?
Well, I think we need,
But you can think about it. I guess I'm just putting you on
I
the spot,
think,
but.
no, you're not, it's fine. I mean, it's a lot of information, we need to discuss it. I think perhaps at our next meeting. I think at our next meeting, we should have a discussion, and then also discuss next step. If there's a next step.
Yeah,
And decide if we're gonna get, how do we do that?
yeah, and what does it mean?
Because, yeah, what does that mean?
You know,
So-
if we were to continue an exploration,
Right.
what would the next step of an exploration be?
Right.
First of all, I think it would be good to look at the materials, so maybe
Yeah,
that's, maybe that's some of the home, I mean,
Well, I
like,
think we should
Thank you.
probably.
thank you,
you.
David,
Thanks,
very
Bob.
much.
Thanks,
Um,
Dave.
share this-
Nice to meet you.
We need to share this information, maybe Chris, you could get this information. Did you get one of these?
Yeah.
To,
Yeah,
the
Well, a
members
live
that aren't
one,
here.
a live one would have the links.
well,
If
the
you email
URL, if you go to, that's where I was
Yeah.
looking at the links, the tiny URL listed at the top,
Yeah.
that actually is that document
Has
in your
everything, okay,
hand.
got it.
So I will send that out with the meeting minutes,
right,
is a link to this document.
Good.
Please review.
right.
Yeah, so I was like, how do I get that?
For our next meeting. And that's, I guess, what we'll say in the minutes. Take a look at this, after you talk about your in-depth notes on the presentation.
Most people can watch the video.
Right, that's true.
I was gonna
And they may be
suggest that.
watching live right now.
Yes.
Oh, you mean other members of our planning commission?
I do.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do that
Okay, good.
at our December
What is our next meeting? 19th.
19th. Oh, okay.
Will you be here?
I think so.
We should just keep pushing on.
No,
We are
no.
scheduled to
It's
meet
just,
every
you know,
third Tuesday,
There's
so.
two people I know that are trying to move. It's very
Right.
difficult
Yeah.
for them.
We need to stay on task with the agenda, the way it's itemized, before we go to, we need to go, unless we're gonna skip 5.
No, I just want to tell you what 5 is,
Okay.
because I got the, maybe you didn't understand what that
No,
is.
I'm close.
So,
And then Gary came in yesterday, and confused me even more, so.
well, we had discussed, and I probably didn't, I do apologize, I had to, Chris, you and I, well, this is administrative matters, but we need to set up a time where we actually communicate right before we get this out, because we missed each other, and then I was gone. So, I just skipped administrative matters, so I will skip back to number 5 now. So, we had talked about putting a little sort of how-to guidelines for site plan review applicants. And you did send me, you sent something out with minutes,
Right, so that's what our current form is today.
and that's already confusing, so,
Oh.
yeah.
That was part of why I wanted to send it, it was
Yeah.
confusing to me.
So, but this, I think, is a good start. I brought a couple, and I don't know if I don't think they're really great examples, so I was sort of pulling it together last minute. But, and you know what, I'm gonna hold off on this, because
Okay.
I would like to do a better job on this. I was looking for sort of a, example of a site plan and what needs to go in the drawing, and this is a little too technical looking, because it can be a lot, it's just it's a residence with a pool, but it doesn't give enough, it needs to be clearer and simpler. But I think a drawing, 8.5 by 11, saying this has all the information that we need from the applicant.
In a
it's-
site plan review situation.
Right, but also similar for a PUD.
Right.
It's very I'm pretty sure it's almost all the same.
I'm actually pushing that more and more for all applicants.
Right.
I mean, I get a house site just for residential that is not, it's a by right use. I just grant the permit, and it's still just shy of cocktail napkins sometimes. So what I'm hoping is, what you're going with this, is that we can actually utilize that same concept across the board
I agree.
for applications.
I agree.
Right. And then I had some other information here that I will put together, because a couple other things came up, and maybe I will get it out to people before the next meeting.
And if sometime between now and then, if you want to sit down, I can go. I've
Yeah,
got
well,
some things
let's
I-
make up a time to meet after this meeting.
Discuss that.
That's good though, Katie. I think this is a good, we definitely talked about, offering more guidance, offering more clarity, you know, maybe showing examples, making it, you know, better for the applicant, better for the zoning administrator, better for the planning commission and the zoning board.
And I also came across an example of basically process and what the applicant does first and then what they do. And, you know, and so things are pretty set before they come to a meeting. So we don't get people coming to meetings or applicants coming to meetings and they don't have what they need and we don't feel comfortable ruling on it or not ruling on it, and it just is a waste of
It
time.
delays.
That's happened a couple times, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you remember one of those times? That
It causes
kind of
unfair delay for the
What?
applicant. It causes unfair
It's-
delay for the
It's
applicant.
unfair for everyone.
That's right.
You know, and not anyone's fault, it just, you know,
Right.
just happened.
That's great.
So, okay, any other comments on that? No?
Good
And so-
progress.
Excuse me?
It's good progress.
Okay. Administrative matters, Chris and I need to set up a regular time to meet. And before meetings, and I do apologize, there was confusion, a little confusion about minutes and such, and I had to go out of town and we didn't connect. And also my email, you gotta get my right email. That's okay. So,
These are not egregious. These are not egregious. We
No.
will work this out.
No, I switched it before the meeting.
okay, no, we're good, no, this is fine.
We're
So,
game.
okay, now, two things I have for administrative matters. One, I'll go to B first, is the all hazards mitigation plan, which they mentioned many times in this presentation, which Tim is organizing. And they want a member from the PC and they just put me on it because
Did the select board put you on it?
I don't know how I got on it. Between the two of them, they just said, you know, but if someone, and I said, okay, unless someone else would like to do it.
This is what Valerie spoke to us about.
Right.
In her presentation, or when she.
Right, she
mentioned
just
this.
mentioned it.
Yeah,
But Tim is the one running the meeting and there's,
because it's Addison County is doing it, not just Bristol.
He's probably providing support.
right, it is
To Bristol.
No, it is
Yes.
Bristol.
Okay,
It is
okay,
Bristol.
okay.
And this is a big part of it. This
Yes.
is a part of it. So, the first meeting is December 5th at like 3 in the afternoon. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people and they did a, you know, a doodle or Google or calendar thing.
Yes, I've seen that.
I was like, I don't know. So, that is one meeting that's set. So I don't know if anyone else is interested. I'm happy to go.
Well, I
That's
think,
just,
I think it's fine that you go, but I don't think there's any reason why there couldn't be
more than one.
more.
I totally
Yeah.
agree.
Me too.
Yeah.
So,
We need backup all the time, no matter
yeah,
what.
because then if one of
That's the best
us
thing.
couldn't go. So I don't know if anyone here is interested.
I can't go on the 5th. I'll be traveling.
Are you talking about adding a second person to go to this meeting?
Yeah.
Or to join,
Or just to
serve as backup.
Or to be part of it, I don't think there's any preordained slots.
I think there is.
There is. They were pretty clear on
Who was clear?
Valerie.
the select board.
What boards are running? Is my
Okay, so
guess.
what were their slots? Roughly,
Planning commission.
yes.
Myself,
Oh, you're on it.
I'm on it.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Valerie?
Valerie, I think Kevin Brown's name's on it. I think they've got the ZBA on there for some
Right.
reason. Pete Bouvier from the highway.
Okay, good.
I'm trying to think who else was on there. I'm trying to think if they had Brett from the fire on there, or I can't remember.
That sounds like someone from the fire department.
Yeah, so it was actually, it's a group of about, what would you say, there's 9 or 10 people on it?
Seemed like it, around there. I
And
remember.
it's a fairly well, I can tell you who's on it in a second.
That's all right. I guess I would then restate my view. If they are creating designated slots, I think any one of us should be able to go, just as
I don't see why you couldn't have someone fill in for you.
fill in, or even if you're there, just to listen to what
Observe.
they're doing.
Yeah.
And if
They're
they
open
get the
meetings.
opportunity
Yeah,
to speak,
yeah.
So,
because I think it's important to have a diversity of views represented.
Right.
I think the meetings are open, the
Yep.
public meetings anyway, but I think from a sort of, you know, to make sure
It's a fifth.
we have good representation through the process, we might need two of us to be able to spell each other, okay?
So why don't you be the,
No. I did all that spelling. I'm on my week, my year off.
you're on.
Where is the meeting? It's not here.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I thought it was.
why wouldn't it be here?
I don't know, I thought it was somewhere else.
Like within Bristol?
It's not, yeah, maybe. I can't
I read
remember.
like 4 emails at once.
It's in my phone somewhere.
So, first piece was I've got that email in a moment. The
You should
group
go.
that they've put together is
Can
Joel
you go?
Bouvier from the select board, Pete Bouvier, the road foreman, Valerie Capel as the town administrator, Brett LaRose, fire chief, Jill Marsano from VTUMS, which is the group that manages our water and wastewater system, myself from planning and zoning, Katie from planning, Kristen from the Conservation Commission. That's the group they've formed at this point. So it was, like I said, a fairly well-rounded.
It's a good group.
But I do think, I agree that it would be good to have more than one person, even if we have one designated person, it's good to have
Right.
backup, especially right now
It's
when we're
supposed to
kind of
listen.
trying to,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd be willing to do it as your backup.
Okay. Do we come at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one's gonna turn any of
Yeah,
us away,
No, gosh.
believe me.
Probably
We
not.
want people to come to meetings. We didn't get 40 people at meetings.
Valerie said, we're forming a committee and everyone went like this.
So when they schedule a meeting, could you let Gary and I
Right.
know
Right. One is scheduled. Chris will know.
for the 5th? Chris,
Well, it is
Chris can let
Tuesday.
us know.
It's Tuesday, the 5th
Yeah, I'm
at
trying to-
3 o'clock.
Here's a good thing to do, after that, and when maybe the next meeting is decided upon, just send it out to everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Because if it's a major task that we're involved with right now, that's a good thing. Just let everybody know.
Yep.
That's
Okay,
good.
got that, Gary?
So 3 people.
That works.
Okay.
It's good.
And
Good
it will
project.
overlap with
Yeah.
this project.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm glad it's.
And by
this is very good timing then
Yes,
for this.
and by
because-
establishing the committee, we staved off the sunset of it, or we were running out of time. And so
Right.
we needed, the town needed to be able to set a process in motion in order to have it not expire formally, which they did.
Okay, so the second piece, or the first piece under administrative matters is here's an idea, a thought experiment. Is I have been concerned about the fact that we have had trouble maintaining or even getting to a 9-member board. And then making it difficult to get any kind of quorum, making it difficult to vote. And I posed the question to Valerie. I said, why do we have to be a 9-member board? And we do not have to be a 9-member board. We can be up to 9. And so here we are, a 9-member board for Bristol, which is a small town. We only have 5 in this, so I had this thought that maybe we should think about reducing the size of our board so that we could be, if we were a 7-member board, which we actually are now.
We have
Are
a
we?
quorum tonight.
Yeah.
So,
Forward
So-
quorum.
The process for this, which I think you probably looked at, what Valerie gave me that day, it didn't tell me, I'm not quite sure how.
the bylaws need to be amended. So,
So that would have to happen.
It doesn't say up to.
no, it's section 331 says the town of Bristol Planning Commission consists of 9 members appointed by the select board.
Okay.
Darn it.
So how, do we do that at town meeting? Is that possible?
The select board, we can propose a change to the select board has to review it, approve it, warn it, have 2
hearings.
public hearings.
Just the way we did it last time.
It's just like
Any change.
the same process that we did when we made the major changes, even a
Yes.
small, they can do some procedural changes.
Well, I
Tentatively?
mean, we start working on it and it happens, you know, it just, even tonight, you know, if we had to do something to, you know, someone's sick and someone had a family emergency.
It
and
could
it's-
happen with 7 too.
It can
Don't
happen
forget.
with 7 too, but it's gonna happen more.
We have held.
We don't have 9
We've had a
members.
good success in quorum because several of us come to every meeting, period.
Right, but the point is,
One of whom is not a member anymore. But I'm not kidding.
no, I know, but if we
Like
have
if I-
7,
Yeah,
we don't even have 9 members, that's
Yeah,
my
I know,
point.
I
We
know, I
could
know.
have 7 members.
I know.
We do have 7 members, don't we?
I'm
Let's see the-
suggesting that 7 is not I got where you're going.
Yeah.
And I, you know,
I think
I've
it will
always
help.
felt like 9 is good because, you know, for whatever reason, that it offers a variety of viewpoint. It can certainly, you know, take longer to get things done.
Right, but we have not had 9 members in a long time.
No, we had 9 members up until March, when John stepped off and Skimmer's term ended and he
Okay.
didn't renew. So we had 9
Okay.
right up until March.
Okay.
We got through our whole big project with
Right,
9.
Right. But there were times that we dropped down because we
No,
lost
we've
Willow.
always had 9 members.
There was,
And
well,
we
Willow was
replaced
gone,
her. Yeah,
but
but
not right away. Okay, but
Yeah.
there was a little lag. It doesn't matter. What?
we have been a 9-member board as long as I have been living in Bristol. Before I was on, it was a 9-member board. Anyway,
Okay.
I'm not
Anyway,
I'm not
it's a
lobbying
thought.
for 9.
We don't have to, I mean, it's something that I'm throwing out there, and if
Yeah.
it's something that people want to pursue, I would like to hear the feedback.
Yeah.
And I just heard it.
Well, in
I-
the old
yeah.
days, we did have 7,
Yeah.
and we also only had 3 on the select board.
Uh-huh.
3 total.
But there was a period of time when there were some very contentious issues, and that always elevates interest in the board.
Mhm.
And so it was a response to enlarge the select board and also the planning commission.
So I don't know when it became 9. It was 9 when I started, and that
So
was
just
8
start
years ago.
throwing some hand grenades, so it will get 9
No,
easy.
no, no.
Well,
Oh,
we
right, I see what you mean.
we've had some hand grenades out there. We still haven't, you know, we just get
You're
so
welcome.
complaints. But I also do want to comment that
Yeah.
and part of this is because we did have 2 applicants and one was not chosen.
So one of the
And that was another issue. I actually wrote a letter to the chair
Of the select board.
of the select board and saying that, you know, I don't know what the reason was, but that this person was very interested, and I had spent time kind of explaining, you know, time had been spent. I felt like I had gone out really seeking people, talking to people. I know I have been, and I'm sure other people have been as
over the
well.
years.
So we're doing that. And then, so I think there needs to be some kind of understanding. Is there a criteria? Well, I mean, it's a little tricky. So for us to try to keep up, you know, get 9, I don't know. I just thought, well, maybe
That's a
one
good
way
point.
to solve that, because we shouldn't be spending all that time doing that. People should want to be on the board. Then maybe it is a smaller board.
So one option as well, and I don't know exactly how they do it, but the ZBA is a 9-person board, but it's 7 active members and 2 alternates. So my understanding is the alternates, if they aren't going to have a quorum, the alternates are then called in so they can build a quorum off from the alternates.
Huh. So
That-
the alternates always come to the meetings
I don't believe.
to serve as backup in case?
That I don't know. That would be an interesting I don't know the exact
Yeah.
specifics. I know that that's how
Maybe
they.
you can have voting members, or non-voting members, that's what I mean.
Yeah. So I don't, because the ZBA meets so infrequently is the other piece. They're as needed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They don't have a schedule
That's
meeting
true.
necessarily.
That's
So
That's right.
And
They
if
only
the-
respond to applications
yeah,
that
if
go
there's
to
an
them.
application, it's like Kevin tries to pull together the board, and I think if he only has 4 people or 3 people, he's like, okay, so he's on the phone with the 2 alternates, we need a 4th to make a quorum.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that logistically works, or if that's the 5th person on that group, but you might want to reach out to Kevin.
It means there's less need for consistency between meetings too, so what we do is work on projects
No.
and efforts that are meeting after meeting, and we're refining and proposing. They get a thing, they act on it, they may postpone to a date certain, but they're acting on it, it's over, our work is different.
The only sort of other way you could do that is if you want to do the alternate method would be for hearings. For public hearings, that you could have alternates so that you could guarantee you have a quorum for a public hearing. But again, that's somebody who has to be perpetually informed.
Yeah,
So
they might as well be on the board.
yeah, so
It's an alternative, or an alternate, right?
it's just
Would be an alternative too.
Yeah.
Be an alternative.
Right. So Bill, we've had membership
Watch out
on
for
the
this.
Addison County Regional Planning Commission. You are one of 2. I think there have been
There's
alternates.
3.
There are 3 permanent,
Supposed to be.
supposed to be, but there are alternates always appointed? And do those people go to each meeting?
No.
No, okay,
Well, they usually only come when somebody has to step down.
okay. All right.
And with conflicts of interest
Um,
or-
That would be a possibility. That happened with the, some
And that's
of the-
another issue with this board as well.
yeah, that has happened on rare occasions, but mostly because somebody has a change in their job or where they live,
Ah,
or they just, their family
yeah,
is taking more time than they
yeah,
should.
yeah, personal. Well, Katie, I'm not opposed
No,
to
I
it.
know.
I'm just not sure it's gonna solve the challenge of meeting a quorum.
I'm not opposed to it either. I think I do prefer the 9-member board if we can accomplish that.
Yeah,
Only because there are always circumstances,
right, and I
like
do,
my own last year,
Yeah.
right,
which I couldn't
and,
avoid.
That's right.
and
And so that
there's
leaves a
gonna
hole.
be,
And that creates a bigger hole if the group is smaller. to
right,
begin
that is
with.
true.
So
So we've
But we
had,
need the bodies, because
I
we.
like the
'cause-
extra minds, the idea of the extra minds
Mhm,
around the table, I think is good.
mhm,
I think that's been the,
mhm.
that's probably the viewpoint of the select board, I suppose, at being receptive to keeping it at 9. I mean, they certainly didn't lobby us at any point during our, bylaws process in which they said, really you should go down to 7 or
7.
less,
Mhm.
I think they're comfortable with it. It has served us well, at
Right.
least, I think, in the, with these major projects that we've done over the past 8, 9 years, 10 years. I don't know the answer to the
Yeah.
recruitment
I don't
issue.
know,
It's challenging, no matter what.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it would even happen. I mean, they would have to, I think we need to go to the select board and that's another thing.
We'd have to have a good reason to do it, because if, let's just say it even went to some sort of venue in which you would want to describe why, it can't just be because we can't get members on it. It's sort of, that's a depressing reason to,
Well,
it's really sort of self-defeating and not very reflective,
We had
it doesn't reflect well on us, I have to say.
Well, we had 2 people that, and one was turned away. So we want to be able to move forward and vote
Yeah, I agree.
as well.
Yeah.
So, and-
So we have 7 of a 9, currently a 9-member board, meaning we'd still have to have 5, which means in a situation where we have to vote,
We can only be
we
missing 2
still have to have
people.
5, we can only be missing 2 people.
Right.
And in that case, we still have to have 5 in alignment. So it's always a challenge, but maybe
Yeah.
that's part of the good thing about the nature of this board, which is it forces us
To be in alignment.
to compromise and to come to the medium ground. I am not channeling you, but it's kind of true.
You're not what?
I wasn't channeling Bill.
Oh,
That's okay. It's okay if you
His
do.
ears perked up, did you see them?
You got my attention.
I like when we all agree.
It's better when we do.
Okay, so,
I'm glad.
it'd be nice to have a couple more members
Mhm.
and, keep working on it.
Yeah.
I wish the select board work on it as well, and maybe I will ask them to do that.
So when are we going to visit with them?
Well, that's the other thing, when are we going to visit with them? There was a meeting last night?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So,
But when we do,
right now, they're starting right into budget.
right, so they're gonna
it's
wanna
been
concentrate
hard
on
for
that.
me. As I said,
I know.
I've been in Mondays, my parents are relocating and then I've been going back and forth.
So here's the thing, I've said this to you in private, which is, you know, we have this sort of moment to breathe, right? We did some really big projects and, you know, I would never suggest that we not meet. Obviously, we have to meet. You know, we are required to meet once a month, and we do, and we're doing, you know, good and thoughtful work. But short of, well, we do want to meet with the PC, with the select board, because it's part of the, you know, idea, which was to, you know, sort of
And
hear
this is
more from
what you
them
said,
about
yeah.
the kinds of things that they would like to do. But Katie, I don't think we should rush it, because we would want to have it's not just show up and be like, hi, we did our regs, you know, in March,
I
and
think there are other
we're
things.
working on a few things. What do you think? You know, we'd like to frame for them
Yeah.
some of the priorities that we, you know, discussed a couple of meetings ago. And I offered to sort of help
Right.
outline that a little bit more clearly, and I haven't done that, but I will. So, you know, I mean, we could push meeting with them until after town meeting at this point.
Oh.
That's 3 months out, because when would they finish the budget and have to warn it?
They're usually done with that in January.
Okay, so that's 2 meetings away
You get through the holidays.
for us, right?
Right.
Okay.
And we haven't really.
When you put it that way.
Exactly.
What are we doing next meeting? And we're
So-
doing
No, we're not doing the next meeting.
Just working with the select board in the past, so what they're gonna want is just what you said. They would like you to come in and say, here's our list of priorities, probably ahead of time.
Yeah. What
These
do
are
you
things,
think?
where would you like us to prioritize?
Right.
Please give us direction.
Right.
And bring it in with like
Which
the
we may or
top,
may not take, but you know.
just bring your top 3 or 4.
Yeah,
Your top 3 or 4, present them. And it doesn't need a whole lot of
right.
discussion. If there's,
Right.
especially if you disseminate the information ahead of time, they should come ready
Yes.
to go.
So what if we do it, you know, it's not after town meeting, but it's after they've finished the budget? Because they have to finish it at a certain point to get it, right?
Yeah.
To get it
Oh, yeah.
like in the book
Just
or
get a
something.
report, yeah, so why don't I find out what that date will be, and I'll communicate it back to you, Katie, is when
Okay.
Valerie thinks.
That would be great.
Is
That
that
would be
in
great. And
the
then let's aim our sort of like meet up with them for after the bulk of that work for them. Let them get through the budget process, and then,
And then we can really find, and
Gives us some
that'll
time.
give us time to really sort of finalize what we're gonna do,
yeah,
what we wanna work on.
yeah,
Plus, we're gonna review, we'll get this packet together for a site plan and PUDs. And I think that we might wanna talk about, there were little tweaks and changes that we saw in
I was just
the
gonna suggest that.
zoning, because we would need to, if that's possible, to get that ready for town meeting.
no,
Would we?
No, we
No,
missed
we're
that.
already
We
too
missed
late.
that
Are we?
window.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
You
in
should
all
think
honesty,
of
November would be the first time that there'll be another public vote.
Exactly.
A year from now.
You aim from that, you aim for that.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean, like, in this, lack of better terms, lull that you've got right now.
Right,
Yeah, start hammering those out.
right,
I've got a few that I've come across that are like,
yeah.
from administering it now, it
Yeah.
changes the whole
Yeah,
perspective in
yeah,
the last
okay.
month.
Okay.
That's good.
All right. So then the next meeting, we can just have a Christmas party. Or holiday party.
Yay!
Hey, you can still say Christmas around here, I sure hope so.
I said it.
Good.
And the other one, Katie, the suggestion is for, if you're gonna look at doing some bylaw rewrites, if you guys wanted to tackle subdivision.
Oh, yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to look at that.
So I've got some samples for you as well.
That'd be great.
Pulled together.
I'd like to understand more why we don't have subdivision regulations, why we didn't pursue that in the past. You don't have to answer that right now.
We
but-
didn't have
I'll be
site plan
glad.
either.
That's fine.
Okay.
We didn't have site plan, so.
Hmm?
We didn't have site plan. Now we have site plan. One step at a time.
Yeah.
Or not.
at least address them one thing at a time instead of a
Okay.
big sweeping change.
Okay,
Okay,
that's good. That's a good amount of work.
all right. Oh, and we don't, did I get those? Oh, no, I didn't print out the minutes, so we can't approve the minutes anyway.
don't
You
know.
sent it. You sent it.
You sent the wrong ones.
Yeah, no, for now,
Why
I
do
just
that?
have to resend new ones for the follow-up meeting for next time.
I also, actually, I'm sorry, I wanted to encourage, does everyone get, I know you get the email, you get the newsletter from, everyone gets this?
Yeah.
Oh, you got it right there.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's good.
Yeah, there's good things in here, and there's grants, and there's, I think that we should all,
Yep.
oh, I know, there was something I did want to mention in here.
This is the Addison County Regional Planning Commission
roads.
newsletter.
Oh, I read that, yeah. I thought that was important.
Yeah.
What is it?
But I
Well, it'll become more important as we get along the
Yeah.
road here, I think.
Yeah,
What did you
What?
find? We're in suspense.
the, okay, what is it? Hey, you can talk about it, Carrie.
You say it, Gary.
Well, I just, it caught my eye because it is a municipality requirement apparently as of January 1, 2018, that the municipal and regional plans must map and address forest integrity, including identifying areas of maintenance of the forest blocks, wildlife habitat connectors, with an eye toward minimizing forest fragmentation and promoting health, viability, and ecological function of the forest. Plans may include specific policies to encourage the active management of those areas of wildlife habitat, water quality, timber production, recreation, or other values or functions identified by the municipality. And they're having a webinar series that starts November 28th,
It would be, I think maybe
explaining that.
we should.
Do you want to take it?
This is something that has to be adopted as part of the town plans
Really? Okay.
What was the due date
as
on
of
that?
January 1.
It's as of January 1st. Is
So when you I would
read-
take
when
it when you update.
No,
When you
municipal
update.
plans adopted after
Yeah.
January 1st must include them.
Right,
Right.
so
So
the next time.
we
Yeah,
update.
and the next
Yeah.
time we vote.
Has to
take it.
include.
So let's, I see, I marked it. Yeah. I read it too. I knew there was a couple of things in here, and that, so it would be good if some of us watched the webinar. Gary.
It is from 2 to 3:30, and that's nap time.
Yeah, okay. You could do the later one, or the earlier one. There's more than one.
No, I would
think
try-
they're
I
all
would
the
like-
same.
That'd
be great.
I will watch it. yeah.
Okay. Good.
That's great.
And,
So you're going to the All Hazards Mitigation Plan Review Committee meeting on December 5th, and you're going to watch the webinar.
Just don't
Yeah.
find where it is, just.
yeah.
We're just filling up Gary's
I
calendar.
don't know
Nice.
I don't know who I'm gonna get to do my Christmas shopping.
Me.
I'm not doing any.
That's a thought.
Get a nice hug.
That's right, that's better anyhow.
Yep.
Okay. So, public comments?
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Hey, thank you.
You too.
Public.
You too.
Say hi to Mary for us.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, and did we not let you know? I just am not in the, I should have
No,
let
you
Mary
knew
know.
that there was a meeting. You're here
Mary
instead of Mary.
emailed me.
Yes,
Oh.
yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good on top.
Do I need to tell you, or do you check with the town?
Mary always tells me, so she figures it out somewhere or another.
She knows the third Tuesday.
These are
Okay.
important.
Okay, all right, so, I move.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Yay.
Okay.
Thank you. Great meeting.
nice.